Hello, everybody. We'll just give everyone one more minute to get into the meeting, and then we will go ahead and get started. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm sure we've all met by now and you know who I am, but I'm Bailey Berlanti, VP of Business Development. Michael always catches me if I don't introduce myself, so going to start off with that. Welcome to today's Fall Central Command webinar. This is, I think, the second of kind of our three-part fall series that we've been looking at doing. Today's topic is going to be validation rules. So Michael is going to be going through the hows, the whys, the whats of validating your data coming into Central Command so that we can make it cleaner, more usable for reconciliation, for reporting, and just for general use. So we're going to do our presentation like we normally do, and we're going to follow that up with Q&A. A few housekeeping announcements. Everyone is muted with cameras off, so you will not be seen or heard. You can just sit back, enjoy the show, think of your questions from the safety of your screens. This webinar is going to be recorded. The link will be published post-event. We had a little hiccup last month, so it took an extra moment to get that sorted out. So fingers crossed, I'm not having any technical difficulties with that this go around. So the recording will be sent out right after we've got everybody logged off and the recording rendered. And then I will also post it onto our YouTube, which is a more shareable link for you to pass on to colleagues and anyone that wasn't registered. You can use the Q&A tab or the chat. We use both of them, and you can even ask anonymously if you prefer to stay hidden, although I can't guarantee that Michael won't call on people if there's not any questions by the end of the presentation. So fair warning there. I'll try to come up with a few questions of my own to distract him for y'all. Just a note on upcoming webinars for after this one, our October session, guarantee you we're going to have a lot of interest in this one. We're going to put Michael in the hot seat when it comes to exchanges that are tied to an MCO or have a residual value. So I know we get lots of questions around how to process those, how to reconcile those, match those in the system. And so we've kept down some of the questions that have happened on previous webinars related to maybe ARC or BSP reconciliation, and we're going to try to tackle that topic in the spookiness of October. So hopefully there's no residual values haunting the system after that. But for today, we're going to talk about validation rules. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael. I will delay no further. Director of Product Management, Central Command Expert Extraordinaire, and our teacher for today. Hopefully there's not a test at the end. So Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Bailey. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon if you're in the UK or in Europe. I want to say it's finally cooling off here in Texas a little bit, so that's awesome. We're going to get into validation rules. As always, we're going to show you the validation rules and the setup, and we're going to be talking about this in the web environment. This functionality, same as in the desktop, but we're going to show it here because we want to ensure that everyone is aware that this functionality is available on the web so that you can start to move people out of your RDP environments, get them into a web server, giving them the ability to manage your hardware, reduce some hardware costs, reduce some server costs with this. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down in our Central Command menu. I'm in my Central Command menu here on the left. I'm going to go down to Interface. Under the Interface module, I'm going to go to Fixed Registers. And I'm going to show there are two different things in our fixed registers. And while we're focusing on validation rules today, I'm going to start off with one statement, multiple statements about data mapping. And the reason why I'm going to mention this is because data mapping also has built-in data validation. What I mean by that is if I go in to look at a data mapping set, for example, very quickly. Like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here.
Oh, Michael, you're not sharing your screen yet.
Oh, shoot. Okay, let me start over. Hi, everybody. This is Michael Guiette. Okay, so give me 1 second and I will refresh my screen here and reload that screen. It's taking a moment here to.
He needs morning coffee.
I'm
or
telling
afternoon
you.
tea, I guess, if you're on the other side of the pond.
Yeah. So what I'm waiting on here behind this data mapping rules, I wanted to start. So I went into my central command menu. I came down under the interface section of the main screen. I looked at fixed registers. Under fixed registers, we have data mapping and we have validation rules. When we talk about data mapping has and I hit my refresh button. That's why I did that. So I'm going to go down to my fixed registers. I'm going to go into data mapping and I'm going to do data mapping set inquiry. I'm going to load this. And if I were to go into a data mapping set, I want to mention, because it's data validation, I do want to mention the data mapping, because the data mapping is important in that if we are creating a data mapping set and we have a severity of E here, what this is telling the system is it's saying that you want to validate the format of the remark that's being entered into the system. Okay, so in this case, I have a remark. This is my rule is the main. My UDID identifier is U1, so my type is going to be U1, and then in the text, it's going to say in the text, I'm going to have one piece of information, my email address, and it's going to be have a delimiter at the end of a dash. Now, at the end of the line, we're going to say dash, so it just says that if it doesn't find a dash, it's going to put everything that's in that field, in that remark detail in the PNR, into the UDID1 data mapping field. But if I had a validation rule that had multiple pieces of information in it, okay, so I might have a low fare, a high fare, a reason code, an accounting line number. If I'm putting more than one piece of information down in this mapping section, and my remark does not conform to the structure that I've given it, like the full fare with a slash, low fare with a slash, reason code with a slash. If I don't have that format exactly, then data mapping's validation will look at the format that that remark is supposed to be in. And if it doesn't conform to the remark format that we've told it to look for, this is where this severity, the error message or the warning message comes in. So I don't remember, Bailey, and you can correct me, but if we haven't done data mapping sets, we will come back to this in another section. But I did want to point it out only because it is important to know that there is validation, but it's not validation of the data within the remark, which we're going to get into in just a minute. It's going to be validation of validation is with regards to data mapping. For validation rules, if we go into rule inquiry first, and I'm going to search, the first thing I'm going to point out is all of my validation rules here up to row number or line number 26, which is validation rule number 28, okay? What that means is these we reserve Central Command or Unit 4 Central Command Development Team reserves the first 100 rule numbers, 99 rule numbers, so that if there comes a time when we know that we have to have a valid piece of information to go into the system, we can use up to the first 99 rules as a development feature. So you are not going to be able to add a new rule under rule number 100. All of our custom rules will start at 100 and go up. But anything below 199 and lower are system-defined validation rules. Now, that does not mean you don't have the ability to modify them, to turn them on or off. So I'm going to go into my validation rules here. And under the rule, if I say I'm going to look at rule number 2, for example, and it shouldn't be taking this. I am in my demo environment, so I'm looking here to see if I do have a little bit of a lag. So here I can search for my validation rules. I'm going to look at rule number 2, air segment arrival city check. Okay, this tells me it's an error message. It's based on the transaction, and we'll talk about each one of these fields when we build a new transaction or a new validation rule. We can either use transaction or adjustment. A transaction means the interface message coming in from the GDS, or someone's manually building a PNR in the system. That's what a transaction is. Adjustment would be the adjustment, entering an adjustment into the system, whether we're doing the adjustment import or we're doing the manual adjustment entry, or if we're doing the auto update adjustment entry. Invoice itinerary. Are we going to validate information based on the invoice or the itinerary? Status code, we can make this, again, these are the system defined rules, so we still can close a system defined rule. Okay, we can make it an error or a warning. So we do still have some control over these system defined rules. The reason they're there is because if we've got an airline ticket come in, we want to make sure that the air segment city code is part of the city code table, is valid in the city code table. So it just helps with our reporting capabilities. These 3 boxes, all clients, works in data load or on the screen. So if you don't want to check when someone's entering something on the screen, you can deselect that, okay? If you only want something that works on the screen, you can say, I just want this validation rule to work if somebody's manually entering something in, okay? So it could be that you want to have the agent put something in to let us know who's making that change in that transaction. Yes, we also capture the user's login and last updated when that happens, but these 3 boxes do allow us to define when those validations rules are used. Now we got 2 boxes down here at the bottom. We have the condition, okay, and then we have filters. These 2 boxes work together. They allow us to do some simplification of information, and we'll get into that when we start looking at these validation rules. So if I come up to my, I'm going to close this. Yeah, I just want to close it. I'm going to go back into my validation rules, and I'm going to open a blank screen. Okay, you will not enter the rule number here unless you're looking at and wanting to modify a previous rule. In this case, I'm going to go in and I'm going to say this is going to be a new validation rule. And so we're going to talk first about, what types of things we can do within validation rules. The first thing I do want to point out, we do have the error. You can make this an error message. error message, a validation rule that's marked as a severity of error, will stop that transaction from being saved to the live tables. It'll either hit the, if it's an interface transaction, it's going to go into the view error messages screen, and it's going to wait for somebody to go in there and correct it. If you're modifying a transaction in the system and you have an error message that stops it, you won't be able to save that until that error has been corrected. So that's what an error message is. A warning message is a flag, if you will. The flag means that we can save that transaction to the live travel tables, the header table, the document table, the error segment table. But we want to be able to flag something in the system so that, let's say, our reporting team has to go back in and correct remarks before the end of the month so that they can say, okay, I need to, my customers have certain remarks, certain things that get put into the system. They want to make sure that we're validating that information in there. A warning message lets the system come in so we can do our ARC and BSP reconciliations. We can do our financial postings. All of those things can be done on a warning message transaction. It doesn't stop the transaction from hitting the system and doing all of the automated processes. It could have a service fee loaded on it. It could have an invoice number generated. All of those things can still occur based on a warning message. Notice here at the bottom of this, we've added a new feature, or Uniforce added a new feature here. It's called default. And I'm going to start with default, first of all. What this default feature is a feature that many customers have asked for that says we wanted to create an if clause, and in the if clause, it's going to search for a specific set of conditions. And if these conditions exist, we want to replace or enter a different value. Okay, so that's what this default is for. This allows me to go in and say, okay, I'm going to, this is going to be the default on a transaction. I can either do invoice or itinerary here. If I say invoice, I'm going to come down to my conditions. Now, conditions, when I add a condition, this is going to be, and it took me a long time to figure this out. But what we're writing in the validation rule is we're writing a true statement, okay? We're looking for what we want the system to find, okay? We're going to find the, let's say that we're going to go into the remark table. We're going to search the type code where the operator is going to be like, and the UDID value, that it's going to be a U1, for example. And we're going to say if the remark type is like U1, and I'm going to add a U1, and we're excuse me, and we're going to say that on the remark table, where's my remark table again? I'm doing this. It's like I can't find what I'm looking for. I'm going to look in the detail, and I'm going to say like, or I'm going to say if the UDID one is not like open character 0-9 close, open 0-9 close, open 0-9 close. What this means is if UDID one is not like a 3-digit numeric value, then I want to, in the default, I'm going to actually change this part to the correct because this is my correct. This is what I want to be able to do. I'm going to go to default. And I'm going to say in that table 1 on the remark table, well, this is something I didn't expect. I cannot add the remark value here. So I will question that and get back to it. So typically what we would find is that remark table would be here. We would go to and find that condition and enter the value of. So if I go to my, let's go to document. I'm going to go into my, just as an example here, statement info, and I'm going to say put in value, no, you did 1. Okay, so what this would do is, if I have a condition, okay, remember, I'm writing a true statement here. I'm saying, look at the remark table. The remark type is like you did 1. The remark detail is not like you did, or 3 digits, a 3-digit number. Then what that I'm going to do is, by default, I'm going to have the system add in the statement information field on the document row, no, you did 1. Okay, so this would allow us to have a validation rule. Instead of stopping that transaction, it could go in and make an update to the transaction based on a specific value that I'm looking for. If we were looking at that you did 1, let's say that I want to, I'm going to change this up. I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to start and I'm going to do the same thing, but I want to look for a validation rule. I want to create a validation rule that says, if I don't have a you did 1 there at all, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, no, you did 1. Okay? I'm going to make this an error message. I'm going to come down and I'm going to say it's going to be on the transaction invoice and it's going to be active. I'm going to, if I needed to use this for all clients, I could make this same validation rule across all clients. Most, depending on what business unit you have, if you're using the same customer number across all clients and they have the all same reporting requirements that requires them to have a you did 1, then that might be a condition. Okay, so this message is what is going to show up in, this message is going to be what is going to show up in the view error message screen in that message column. So I'm going to put in, you did 1 missing. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say add, and I'm going to go to my header table. I'm going to say cust ID or customer ID. And I'm going to say like 11,000. Then I'm going to add. I'm going to come down here and say new filter. The reason why I'm going to use a filter now, so when I choose new filter here in my conditions, what it does is it takes me down to the bottom of this screen. And when I show you, when you see what I do here, you'll see why I'm using this conditions or the filters down here. So the filter name I'm going to say is you did 1. And this is going to be the remarks table. So I can start in typing. This is type ahead, so I can use remark there. The type is going to be like you 1. Okay. Now, notice that when I named this filter, it changed the name of that filter box up here at the top, the table 1. So I've chosen that what I'm looking for this customer, because they must have a you did one in all of their PNRs, I'm going to come down here, and when I select this drop down, you'll see that I have count. And I'm going to say not like, not like 0. Okay, so my true statement is if the customer number, like 11,000, has a remark type like you did one with a count of 0, or is like, sorry, like, if it's like 0, meaning it looks at all of the remarks, it does not see a U1 in the type column, so that my count of a U1 is 0, I'm going to stop this transaction. So what I'm doing here, and that's the simple test here, is this a true statement for what I'm telling the system to look for? Okay, so this is where that comes into play. Now, there is I haven't found a limit to the number of conditions or filters you can use. Okay, a lot of times we'll have different conditions that might have different filters. So the condition that we're using as a count might be on a different table. I might be looking at the hotel segment that is with a corporate rate code of, COR. So the filter conditions can be related to any type of count that you want to do on this screen. So it really does help us to look for those types of specific information. We can also use, and I'll get into this and I'll say this. So if I save this, this is the other thing on my, hold on, what did I do here? No. Let me close that. What I did is guess what? I hit F12. I can't do that in the web. I got to click save. Okay, so I've saved this transaction. Now, when I come back over to CentralCommand, I go into my transaction inquiry print invoice. I'm going to take my date out of there. I'm going to look for cust ID 11,000. I'm going to search, and I'm going to, I went to the wrong screen there. Here I want to go into this one. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to go into my, customer number 11,000. I'm going to load. This is going to pull up my transactions. When I go into this transaction, it's going to take a second to load here. I'm going to go to my remarks. And here you can see that on my code, I do not have a you did one. If I save this, it should come up. Let's save something here. Let's change this value to a 4. And now, again, save this transaction. What I get is my validation rule. So in the past, if you're using the desktop and you're not using the new transaction screen, in the past, you would have to log after you change a validation rule, add a validation rule. You have to log out of CentralCommand and log back into it before your transaction screen would enable a validation rule to work. It loads those validation rules into memory. So in this case, even just coming in, creating that validation rule, saving that validation rule, if I can just go right to a transaction, test it, pull it up to see. Now, if I notice I don't have a save value here, I can't save this because I made it an error message. I would have to click correct. it would take me back here. I would have to come in here, add a third row, do U1, and have a value of no. And now I'm going to save this transaction. So saving that transaction now is going to pass that validation rule, because the only thing I said there, it had nothing to do with what I was putting into the validation rule. What it had to do with was, if I'm going to validate that the count, the number of UDID ones in that PNR was not like 0. Okay. So that's kind of a very simple way to do validation rules. If I close this, let's go back over. I want to go ahead and let's talk about another thing that's available in the validation rules. So what we're going to do is we're going to validate against a different table. Okay, so in this case, again, I'm still going to use an error here. If I'm testing something, I'll make it a warning message. The reason why I'll make it warning while I'm building and testing is because, especially if you're doing this in production, which I do not recommend, I recommend testing in your test environment. But if you are doing it in production and you set it up as an error message, it may stop transactions from coming into the system. If you make it a warning message, it won't stop those transactions, but it will allow you to still test with it and things like that. So be aware of that functionality. So if I'm going to be testing something, building something new, I want to make sure it works before I make it an error message. Make it a warning. That way I can still bring new transactions into the system through it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, I'm going to look for a condition. In that condition, I'm going to say, okay, let's look at my header table. The field I'm going to look for here is going to be my GDS source. And I'm going to say in list, and I'm going to come out to table B, and I'm going to say my see here, should be travel codes here. Okay, so travel codes is what table I'm going to be looking for. Okay, and in this case, I might say what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new filter. And in this filter, I'm going to say this is going to be my travel code. And this is going to be travel codes is going to be my table. This is my translation codes on at the bottom, right? So the field A is going to be code type. And this is going to be like GDS. Let's go look and see what it is for sure. So what I'm going to do down here under my fixed registers, translation codes, my code type is going to be GDS SRC. These are the GDS codes that we have. So what we're doing is, so we're going to say where the code type is like GDS SRC, and we want the travel, and we want the code here. So this is going to be in travel code, and we're going to add travel code. And type. And this is going to be code and not like essay. So here, what we're telling the system, okay, is to look for the GDS source on the header to tell us if it's not like, if it is like anything but Sabre, then we want to create a warning for that. We want to be able to filter on that. So again, probably not something, not a good validation rule that I'd be putting in, because we're going to accept whatever GDS is coming through the interface. But understanding that you can validate something on the header table against a different table within the database. So if you have a list of codes, one of the things that we've been talking about recently is service fees and fee generation codes that you might be putting into a remark in that P&R. So this would allow you to say, I want to look at the list of valid codes that I can use for service fees. And if I have that fee code that's not in my transaction list, or my list of fee codes that I have within the system, then immediately as that transaction is coming in, I know I've got an issue populating or creating that service fee, because the code that the agent put into the P&R was not a valid code that we use in our system. So it just allows us, this second set of tables allows us to be able to define the lookup from a separate set of data within the system. Okay. Trying to think, is there something else? So we talked a lot about validation rules here. We talked about the ability. Oh, I want to do one more here. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is, I didn't save that. I'm going to create a new one here. The last validation rule, or type of validation rule, that I want to talk about is the difference between, so here I'm going to say a warning message. And remember, here I said this can be either a travel transaction or an adjustment, right? So if I'm uploading adjustments into the system, I might want to have a validation rule that looks for the reason code behind the adjustment, having a specific set of reason codes that I use. Okay, so that's where we would use this as validating an adjustment import, or someone who's creating an adjustment, so that we can validate that information. But I want to come back to transaction. Instead of using invoice, I want to use itinerary. Now, let me show you the difference in the two selections here. Okay. If I say that I'm going to look at the transaction, or I'm going to look at the invoice, and I add a field, and I come down here and I say, I want to look at car segment. Okay. If I choose invoice and I choose car segment table, notice that the only thing I have here is a count. Okay. If I've got an invoice item and I pull in car segment, the only thing I can do is say count is like 0, right? So meaning I don't have a car rental reservation on that P&R. The reason why I point that out, and I'm going to refresh this again, is now I'm going to choose itinerary. If I'm validating in the itinerary, now when I come in to add car segment, now I can start to look at all of the fields within that car segment itinerary line and say, I want to be able to do specific validation. Okay. So the difference between choosing an invoice or itinerary is actually going to be, are we validating something that's affecting the financial side of that transaction, the invoice side of that transaction, or are we validating something on the itinerary segments? Okay. When we create a validation rule, when you're creating the conditions, the one thing I would point out is define your validation rules to allow the system to be able to get out of the validation rule as quickly as possible. What do I mean by that? So what I want to start with here, I'm going to start with my header. I'm going to notice that even at the itinerary, if I'm validating on the itinerary, it now gives me the header count, right? So it doesn't allow me to do different types of things there. I'm going to come up and create a new validation rule, and I'm going to use invoice again here. I'm going to add, I'm going to say header. Okay, the first thing I want to do on this validation rule is I want to say customer ID. Now, I can use a relation on a customer, say customer group. It's going to be like my customer group in my relation on customers is going to be 1. That means if the first thing this validation rule is going to check for is if the customer that's being checked, this transaction is being validated, if that customer number does not have a customer group relation of 1 on that customer master file, I can get out of this validation rule. Okay. So the second thing down is I want to validate on the document and the carrier code. Let's see here. Document could be validating carrier code problem. Okay. Carrier code is like AA. Oops. AA. Okay. One thing I've noticed is validation rules are going to be case sensitive because it's looking at the document. AA in the carrier code field is going to be capitals. Make sure you're using, just like whenever you're in the GDS, right? It's all capitals. So make sure you're using case sensitive information here. So this validation rule now, I have 2 different things quickly that allow my validation rule to exit the process quickly. If the customer is not the customer's not in customer group 1, and the carrier code, if it's not like AA, then I can exit this validation rule. I want to use as many conditions here to allow the system to spend as little time checking that PNR against this rule as possible. Find something that can get it to exit the rule. Third thing, I'm going to look at the document again, and I'm going to say the tour code is not empty. Okay, the tour code is not empty. So if I've got if this validation rule says the customer has to be in group number 1, the carrier code is like AA, and the document tour code is not empty, setting up those 3 conditions. First of all, I'm writing a true statement that I want it to stop. Okay. If that tour code is not empty, marking this one as correct is what I'm going to stop. This is when, if I stop this as an error message, if I come back over to my corrections and I go into my view error messages, if when I load, there won't be anything there. Let me see if I have some validation rules that have stopped here. Okay, so here you can see that the customer must be added to the TRF table. Again, this is one of my, so if I look here, this is rule number 7, okay? Duplicate ticket number found. This is not a validation rule that you can create, okay, that a duplicate ticket number found. The reason why is because to find duplicate ticket numbers, the system data load has to look at the document table within the system. So this validation rule, duplicate ticket, is actually a system parameter, okay? And so you can look up, I hate it when I hit F7 and I'm not supposed to.
And they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
You cannot teach an old dog, okay? So here, EXBEW, this is error or warning, dupe tickets, dupe ticket number, days, okay? What I've got is an error message. It searches back 150 days back from the issue date of that transaction. If that ticket number already exists in the system, it will stop it and put on the error message screen, dupe ticket number found. Okay. So based on the ticket that's already in the system, this ticket number that's already in the system, it was done within the previous 150 days. Okay. That's why I'm seeing that I sent in duplicate tickets, and that's why that's coming up. If I would have made this a warning message, if I would have changed the system parameter to W150, okay, it would have put the warning message of the dupe ticket in the view warning messages screen instead of error messages. Okay, so that's what the difference is. Now, notice that there are two system parameters here. Okay, the second system parameter there is for low-cost carriers. Okay, so if you have a low-cost carrier, and a lot of times if we do low-cost carriers and we're putting a ticket number in there, agents will put 10 twos in there. Don't use this if you got a, low cost carriers are just using the same ticket number over and over and over and over again. You don't want to validate against that. So just be aware of that. You can validate either ARC and BSP tickets or non-ARC and BSP tickets. Again, separate type of validation, but it is a validation rule that does set up or come into your view error message screen. Now, if I have this, UDIT 34, what we see here is we didn't see that the message here was really anything descriptive of what we want to have in that UDIT 34. Okay, so let's go back over here to the validation rules quick, and I promise we'll be done with this, and I'll open it up for questions like right now. But let me just do this one really quick. UDIT 34. Okay. Oh, sorry. UDIT 34 is rule number 100. Remark type is like UDIT 34, okay? And it's saying you got to have a remark UDIT 34 in that PNR, okay? That's all it's telling us here. So it's saying if the type is, and this is, type is, whoever built this rule in my demo environment didn't really do much here. So if it's like a UDIT 34, what we want to do here is say less than 0. Remark type. Yeah, I don't know why they have that in there. Okay, so essentially, it's just somebody built this in the demo environment. So essentially what I would do is I would want the validation rule that says you did 34. If the count was like 0, right? Then I need to have a you did 34 in there. So in this case, where I've got like you did 34. So what I would do here is I would say you did 34 remark type is like U34. And then here, I'd say remark. Nope, I would say in my UDID 34 is the filter I'm using. I would say the count is like 0. Okay, meaning I don't have a UDID 34 in that PNR. Here, I would change the rule though to say UDID 34 missing. Okay, so if I save that, if I went to revalidate that transaction, I could revalidate it. If I'm looking at my error messages and I have this UDID 34, that what I know needs to happen is I need to create a UDID 34 on that PNR. This correction column allows the user to be able to enter a UDID 34, U34 dash, and then whatever value needed to go in the value of that UDID. So this is going to be test. So if I do that, okay, so it's not saying that, you know, enter type code. Yeah, so because of, I'd have to revalidate it to be able to change that. But this would allow me to say, okay, so if I had a remark here, it said UDID 34 missing, then I could add the UDID 34 with the dash and the value that would go in the value field of that UDID. So this correction column allows you to, instead of having to go into that transaction, you could then correct it right on that correction column if you knew what was supposed to be in that field, right? So here it does have a UDID 34. So I don't know what they were validating, but it does allow us. Sorry?
Are we ready for some questions?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Do you have a few?
Yep, I do. And I don't know if you're going to be able to get through them. So first question we had, can you give an example of the type for adjustments and verify how the system would handle validation rules that are set up with that type?
Sure. So if we go into the validation rules and we choose, okay, we're going to validate customer. I think I can do customer here. And we're going to use adjustment. Okay. And we're going to come down here and we're going to add in the table A, right? We're going to say adjustment detail. We're going to say cust ID. Here, we're going to say not empty, or if it is empty. Right. So what we would want to do, so the different types of things that you can so when you create an adjustment, if you put in, so I'm gonna open adjustments real quick, right? So if I go into an adjustment and I go into an adjustment screen, if I enter an original ticket number here, and that original ticket number is in Central Command, it will populate the information from the original ticket number along this detail line down here at the bottom. So this is where you could validate a customer number. You could validate if the amount is greater than a certain amount. You could validate certain things that are part of this transaction. Is the agent a valid transaction? Again, when you enter an original ticket number here, it will populate all of the agent information. It'll populate the information from the ticket down here at the bottom. You can also validate, again, on the adjustment detail, right? Customer ID field, you can validate the remarks that they're using. Right? You can validate any of these fields, the reason code. If the reason code is not in the list of approved reason codes, then you can validate that information. So it works whether I'm manually entering those adjustments or using the adjustment import. And only because I'm not as familiar with creating them on the auto adjustment in ARC or BSP reconciliation. I'm gonna find an answer and get it posted out for you. But I believe that those validation rules will work with the auto update features to create adjustments from the ARC or BSP hot or BOSS files. Okay.
Okay.
Did that help? Did that answer the question?
I hope so, but feel free to put a comment on the question in the Q&A if that didn't quite answer it. The next question we have is, would the duplicate ticket recognize voids? Where you were showing that duplicate ticket parameter. How does that handle voids?
Void. So let's say that you have duplicate tickets in the system, or the interface message has come in twice and you didn't have that turned on. Okay. Those, if the void could apply to multiple tickets that were in central command, that would come in more of as a fatal message. Okay. What I mean by that, let me take this out. A fatal message. So the system would say, okay, I've got a void coming in, but that ticket number, either one, if you look here, no documents qualify for a void, right? So that means that the void came in, but the ticket number that was on that void wasn't actually in central command. Or if that, I'm looking to see if I have one here. I would say there could be an error where it says multiple documents apply to this void, right? So there, that's a void coming in. You're not really going to, duplicate ticket number is not going to find a void. Okay. The reason why is because the void coming in, the only thing we get in that void is the ticket number that says, hey, this ticket number is voided. If you have the duplicate ticket number parameter, system parameter turned on, it's only going to be looking at those new ticket numbers coming into the system to say, do I have this ticket number already in the system? Okay.
Okay. And I had another question, but that was just mine. So I'm going to make sure that we end this on time as we're 1 minute left. So thank you, Michael, for sharing information. Like I said, I'm going to work on getting the recording. I apologize for anyone that experienced like some technical glitching, freezing. We'll see if we can figure out what's going on with either Michael's network or ours or whatever's going on there. But thank you for everyone that was in attendance that asked questions, and we will see you next month to talk about those exchanges with MCOs and residual values.
Excellent. Thank you, Bailey.
All right.